Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. We're going to be going over a few of our event updates that we've published. I'll get off to a slow start. I see people are still joining, but today we're going to be going over two significant updates that have been made to the way events function. We're going to go over a totally new feature, which is event certificates, the option to provide certificates to people that attend your events. And we're also going to go over the new event registration editing process. Before we get too deep into the webinar, I want to go over just a little bit of housekeeping first, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be going over today. So first of all, you'll notice your mics are muted. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A function. So at the bottom of your Zoom window, depending on what device you're on, there should be a Q&A option. There is a chat that you can use to kind of give opinions or say hello. But just for ease of support, since we have our support person, Evan, in the chat, who's going to be helping out with answering questions, it's a lot easier for us to manage questions if you use those in the Q&A Zoom function. So if you have any questions, put them there. You can also see what other questions have already been answered by clicking on the answered option. So that's where we prefer to get questions throughout the webinar. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of a Q&A to review some of the questions that were put in the Q&A. Also, this webinar is being recorded, so if you want to go back and kind of rewatch anything that we've gone over, or for those who aren't able to make it today, this recording will be on our YouTube channel. If you ever want to go take a look at our YouTube channel, you can find the recording at clubexpress.com. And that is ClubExpress.com. You search that on YouTube. So when you go to youtube.com, you will search in the search bar ClubExpress.com. That is our channel on YouTube. If you just search Club Express, you'll usually get us that way too. But ClubExpress.com is the name of the channel. While you're there, go ahead and subscribe. That way you get notifications whenever we put up new videos or new tutorials. Whenever we have announcements for updates, you'll see all of those videos posted there. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to be covering today. There's two features that are kind of significant changes to the way events works for ClubExpress. The first is going to be event certificates. So that is an entirely new feature that we have launched for events. It doesn't change the way events function. It's just an add-on. So those of you who are, not necessarily interested in using it, it's not going to change the way you use events at all. So that doesn't affect anything. What it does is it allows you to hand out essentially downloadable or printable certificates as a reward for attending your event. So if you have a class you're hosting and you want to give people recognition of completing that class or course, if you want to give people something that they can kind of use as a way to show that they attended an event, you can give it to them that way. It's very easy to set up. The nice thing about it is that it very much, those of you who've used ClubExpress events before, if you've set up questions, it functions very similar to the way creating questions works, in that you can create 2 or 3 certificates, and then you can reuse those certificates on any event. You just simply apply it. And then all of the information from that event will be applied to the certificate. And we'll go over how to create certificates today. We'll also go over how to apply them to an event and where people go to access their certificates. The other thing we're going to cover is that there's a new registration edit process. So if you're hosting an event that has things that people can alter, so, if they can bring guests, if they have to answer questions, if they need to change their name, if there's anything in their registration process that involves them entering information, and we want to change that later on, people can edit, admins can edit registrations. We have changed that process to be a little bit more similar to the registration process. The final goal of this, a little sneak preview into the reason we're doing this, the final goal of this is to be able to allow for registrants to edit their own registrations. We're not quite there yet. This is just step 1 in that. But what we have done right now is that when an admin is editing a registration process, instead of the old kind of, what would you like to change? Would you like to change an answer? Who are you changing that answer for? 1 by 1 edit process. Now, when you edit a registration, it just walks you through a preloaded version of that registration for you to tweak and then save again and run that registration again with the changes applied. So let's get into kind of demoing these new updates. Today's webinar will probably be a little bit of a short one, so I'll give you a little bit of time. I probably won't go for the full hour, but we will have time for questions at the end. So first thing we're going to cover is event certificates. So we're going to go over the certificate builder first. So when I talk about the certificate builder, we have an option to plug in a certificate graphic, something that says congratulations or awards, or, this is in recognition of, some sort of image that we can select to have be the backdrop of our certificate. So we have a certificate builder built in that I will show you. What you essentially do is you take an image, so you insert an image template of a certificate into the certificate builder. It does have to be a JPEG image file, so it won't work with PNGs or GIFs or anything like that. It needs to be a JPEG. And then once you've inserted that image, there is a field entry tool where you can say, I want to plug in, someone's name or someone's the title of the event or the date of the event, what activities they registered for. They can plug in all of that information so that when they print their certificate, it says this is presented to, Devin for attending this webinar, on this date. When you're uploading your image, there are some things that you should already have in place. So things like if you need to have it signed by the president of the club or something like that, that should be done to the image before you upload it. There's not an option to manually insert additional information that isn't related to the event into that image. So you have to do all of the non-event related stuff on that certificate. So, graphics, logos, things like that. You want to plug that all in ahead of time. So to make it make a little bit more sense, let me walk through that process for you and show you what that looks like. I'm going to change to my demo site really quickly. So this is our Northwest Balloon Club. I'm logged in as Martin Smith. I'm an admin. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to head up to the control panel. I'm going to go over to the website tab of the control panel and click on events. So over here in website modules, if I click on events, there is a new button on the events manager page that admins and coordinators can see. When they log in here, they will see certificate. So we've added a new button here. When you click on certificate, when you click on it for the first time, it should take you straight into the graphic builder. But once you've built your first graphic, it'll actually pop up this little tool here. So I've already built a couple of graphics. So this window pops up here. When we add a graphic, when we add a certificate here, when we click add new graphic, this is the page that people will see first. So we're going to give it a name and then we're going to build our graphic. The graphic name, that's what admins see. So this is what we would call behind the scenes. So I'll say, cert. I don't need to use the full name. This is just for the admin side. The member's not going to see that. And then for the download name, this is the name of the file that people will see when they download it. So I'll say event certificate. So now that we've got it named, what we need to do is actually build the certificate. When we come over here to the little gray tool, and you'll notice this looks a lot like our page builder, our template builder. This is very similar in terms of construction. There's only a couple little options for us to build in. And the first thing we need to do is choose a background. Now, this is where a lot of people are probably going to get hung up. ClubExpress doesn't provide images for the background. What you would do is you would either have someone on your administrative team who knows graphic design, or you would reach out to a third-party graphic designer, or go search on some certificate website where you can have them produce an image for you to use. There's a number of ways you can get an image, but essentially you would just have someone on your team come up with an image. You can use, Photoshop or Microsoft Paint, however you want to come up with that image. But once you have an image, we would come in here and we would select that image. I'm going to select my certificate image here. It's a JPEG. And this is kind of what I'm talking about when I say a certificate image. So you'll see it's just got these kind of like gold frills, a little seal, certificate of achievement, is something that looks akin to this. It does not need to look exactly like this. It can look like whatever you want it to. But you'll notice it says awarded to, and then there's nothing there. For, and then there's nothing there. And then there's a date and a signature spot. Now, as I mentioned before, we would want to go ahead and pre-fill a signature here. I just didn't want to put in someone's signature, but we would want to pre-put in a signature on the image itself, because we are not able to insert a signature into the certificates that will be generated for our users. What we can insert are elements. So that's our background. This is just the JPEG image that we set as our background. When we select an element, we would say element type. We can say things like attendee names. That's the person who attended the event. We can include attendee ID. What that is their membership number. So if they're a member of your organization, they're going to get their member number plugged in. We can include their list of activities. So if it was a multi-activity event, we can include all of the activities that they registered for. The date of the event, if they are a member of a chapter. So a few of our Club Express organizations are chaptered organizations. And if there's multiple chapters, you can include that info. And then the title of the event. I'm going to make a basic certificate today. So I'm going to say very obviously I want to include their name. I can insert where I want this to go. That is the difficult way to go about it. Trying to choose the exact pixel I want it at. You don't need to worry about that. I would almost recommend I would just kind of ignore that. What you can do is you can hit insert element and you'll see Martin Smith pops up there in the top left corner. That's just my example. Instead of selecting that and choosing the pixels where I want it to appear, I can just drag it around. I can just drag that name. I say, I want Martin Smith to appear there. Now, obviously, I want to make sure that it's centered and I want to make sure that everything appears correctly. And I also want to make sure that, it kind of fits with the rest of the certificate. So I can say, I want Martin Smith to appear, but I want it to be a bit bigger. So I'll make that field a little bit larger. I can also alter the text itself. You'll see I've got a few tabs across the top here. I've got position, where I'm controlling the actual position of the element. So I can say apply those changes. And now I've centered the text and I've centered the element on the image. But the next thing I want to take care of is playing around with the text style. So I can add additional text if I wanted to add text before or after. I normally wouldn't mess with these, but if there's something like, awardee, I can add information like that and it will say awardee Martin Smith. And it will just add additional text before, or I can add additional text after if I wanted to. But in most cases, I'll just leave that blank. Style is where we can come in here and we can do things like changing the color of the text, changing the font, more importantly, changing the size because this text is way too small right now. So I'll say I want to jump that up to a 26-point font to fit in with my the rest of this page. Obviously, I don't want it to wrap around, so let's make this bar a little bit wider just by dragging the edges like we would on any window. We can come in here and resize it. I'll make it very wide so we can fit very wide names if we want to. And then once again, I can go back to position. I can center that element. Come back to style. We can also change fonts. Let's say I want something a little bit scripty, so I'll choose Dancing Script. So now it looks more like a signed document. Then there's also things we can do like making it bold or italic, or we can underline things if we need to. We can also force it to be all caps if we prefer it that way. So it can say Martin Smith in all caps, or we can leave it as not all caps and it will just capitalize the way the person entered their name in their profile. So that's kind of the text controls we have. We can change color, font size, font. That's where we can kind of change all of those options. When we are applying these, we can also add things like the event that they attended. So when we come over here to elements, we can say I want to insert the event title. So this is going to be a certificate applied to this person when they attend a particular event. When I insert event title, now I've got two different fields filled in here. And I can give event title that same treatment. So I can come in here and I can make it a little bit wider. I can say I want it to be centered and center the element. And then I can play around with the text as well and say I want it to be 26-point font. So that's how we kind of add these fields. We also would want to add the date. And that would be our final option that we want to add to let people know this is the date that they received this certificate. So with all of those things done, we've got our picture plugged in. We've got the image of our element kind of entered into the picture of our certificate plugged into the builder. We've got all of the things that we want to be recognized, the person's name, the event they attended, and the date that they attended that event. This is a certificate. This is good enough for us to kind of proceed. And if we hit save, We can apply the changes to that certificate. And now if we go back, we can go back and we can edit that certificate now. So there's that cert that I just created. If I need to go back and make changes, I can just click on certificate again, select the certificate I want to change, and I can get back in and continue to make edits to that certificate. Or I can say, this is good enough and this is what I want to use for my event. The way this works now, if we want to host an event and give people recognition for having attended that event, in any event that we are looking at, so let's use our, I know most people wouldn't get certificates for attending a potluck, but that's just the event that I'm using as an example today. On any event, when we're looking at the back end of the event, so I clicked on the pencil to get in to edit our event. So this is the event admin page. On the after the event option, you will see this is where we can come in and say after the event. If we click on the pencil to edit this page, there is now an option that says event certificate. And the options we have here are all the certificates that we've created. So we'll see there's my potluck provider certificate. So if we're going to hand out, a fun little recognition for having someone, if we're having, someone attend this potluck and give them recognition for having brought items to the potluck, we can set that and save. And whenever we mark someone as having attended this event, they will receive that certificate. So if I click on the attendance option up here, we are tracking attendance for this event. I'm going to mark someone who is registered for this event. And I'll say Martin Smith, that's me. I attended this event, and I will save. And now that that person has been marked as having attended the event, they will receive the certificate that is here. And the way they access that certificate, if we come up to their person's profile, they will get that certificate in their own profile. So they can go to their member profile, and in their event history, so in their member profile under event history, they will see that they attended that event. And along with that event, there will now be a print certificate icon. When they print that out, it will open up a certificate. Oh, I used the wrong certificate for it, but you'll see it plugs in their name, the date that they attended. I accidentally grabbed the one that I set up before, so it's not all centered correctly. But we can come in here and we can see that it gives them a certificate that will award them, recognition for having attended that event. They can also see any other events. So if there was a monthly event here, any events previously that have that little printout certificate option, they can download those certificates and it'll download to their computer just like that. Now, there's not a way for non-members to access certificates at the moment. It is something, again, this is our version 1 of the certificate option for events. There will be future updates to it to allow non-members to access certificates, but right now, if a member receives a certificate, accessing it through that member's profile is the way that you access the certificate. I know there's some questions about, is this only available to people who attend an event? Is it available to non-attendees? It is something that you only receive if you're marked as having attended the event. So whenever we're hosting an event, we want to make sure that if we are having a certificate attached to that event, we need to turn on the track attendance option, either as a part of one of the activities or as a part of the event as a whole. So when we're looking at the event creation, this is a multi-activity event. So over here in activities and items, for at least one of our activities, in this example, registration, we want to come over to the registration and fees option and turn on track attendance. So we want to, track attendance for that activity over here in the attendance option. So track attendance, yes. Once we've turned that on, that will enable this little track attendance button up at the top of the page where we can then mark people as having attended that event. If you're ever curious about who has access to a certificate that's been applied to an event, there's a reports option. And one of the reports that you have is event attendance. So we can see event attendees. Anyone who is marked as attending the event will technically have access to one of those certificates. It's not a matter of, individually applying them. As long as you've applied a certificate in the after the event section, then someone who is marked as attending will have access to that certificate. All right. Let me look at, I've seen a few questions come in through the chat about the certificates. Um, Will the attendees receive an email telling them they have a certificate to download? At the moment, no. That's something that we'd like to make a part of the event, like post event confirmation. But right now, there's not an email that generates. They do receive. If you wanted to send an email out to people letting them know a certificate is available, there is an option in emailings to send emails to all people that were marked as attended. If we come in here to emailings, this is an event emailing that I clicked from the event page. And when we're creating an email, one of the distribution list options is attended. So we can search attended here, all registrants who attended. That would be everyone who has that certificate available to them. Right now, there's not an option to email the certificates out. It's just accessible through the member profile. Non-members technically get a certificate applied to them, but they don't have a way to access their own certificates because they don't have their own member profile. An admin can go into a non-member event history and technically find it and print it and manually email it, but that's a lot of steps for the time being. I think in a version 2 and a future update of this will make it a little bit easier for non-members to receive their certificates. Um, let's see. Someone did ask, is there a reason why the signature can't be scanned? Um, there's just not an option. So all of the options that are available when we're making the certificate, if we go in and look at the certificate builder, the way these elements function is they're all grabbing dynamic bits of information from the event itself. So when we're building that certificate and we plug in the image, the image should already contain all of the static information that we want it to. So image graphics, the certificate terms, any seals for your organization, any logos for your organization should already be applied. The elements are all of the dynamic things that can change from event to event, from person to person. So if you have a signature for someone, that you want to be awarding this particular item to, it's a lot easier on the process to just have that be a part of the image already, instead of having a signature drop in or stacking multiple images. Also, the images themselves don't work well with transparency because we're layering items on top of each other. We already have the text fields kind of doing the heavy lifting for transparency, so it would cause issues with dropping another like image on top of that of a signature. So because we're working with a JPEG here, only the text fields can be truly transparent. So we want to make sure that we're just doing text options here. Already having the signature filled in as a part of the event is just an easier way to go about it. Can you customize the certificate title? So yes. So again, this image that we're working with here, this is just an image that I worked up ahead of time. The image, the actual background image that you select, is entirely up to you. So it can be, a taller image. It can have your club logo on it. But the image is up to you to create. So there's not a kind of like hard coded, like it has to be this size, it has to be this shape, it has to have this information. What is on the image is entirely up to you. All that Club Express is going to do to the image once you've uploaded it is just drop the elements that are dynamic onto it. So things like the name of the person who attended, the activities or the date of the event, or the title of the event. That's the information we're going to insert into the image. The image itself, the background image, is entirely up to your creation. I did see someone. Oh, an interesting question. So is there someone asked if there's an option to include a field like how many hours the event lasts? At the moment, no, but I don't see why we couldn't add that in the future. That would definitely be an easy thing for us to calculate and add in. So possibly something. I know some people use the continuing education module, and the event might have a number of credits. And there's also, how long the event spans, if it's like a 5 hour course or something. Those are probably things that we could come up with a way to add. Again, this is just our first pass at the certificate builder, and we wanted to kind of get input from people. And this is something that will, improve with time. So if you have suggestions like that, always, feel free to send them our way. One more question about certificates that I saw that I want to answer before I move on to the updated registration process is there a way to limit the certificate to only certain people? At the moment, no. If someone is marked as attending the event and the certificate is connected to the event, they will have access to the certificate. Um, if you wanted to limit access to attending that event and getting the certificate, the way you would limit that is just by limiting the at the registration level. So you would say this is only available to members, or this is only available to members of a certain type. You would limit your actual events availability. But for the time being, if you are creating a certificate and connecting it to an event, anyone who is marked as attending will get access to that certificate. All right, we'll circle back to additional questions about the certificate builder, but I want to move on to another item. So there's been an update to the registration edit process. Those of you who've been with Club Express for a while know that the registration edit process used to be um, you would click on the pencil on the registration page and it would give you a drop down of I want to, you would insert what kind of change you want to make, and then it would give you another drop down of apply this change to that person. It was a little bit clunky. We're trying to bit by bit make the registration process easier. The events is a large module, so we have to make these changes kind of incrementally. Um, but we have altered the registration edit process to be a lot more similar to the standard registration process. So it's all, you don't have to memorize multiple different types of controls and edits. So if we take a look once again at my potluck registration here, if we look at the actual event, this is a relatively complex event in that it both has questions and multiple activities. Not all events are going to have that. Some events will be simpler; they'll just be one activity, or they won't have questions, or they'll have neither. In which case, editing it is a lot simpler. But I wanted to show all the different options that could be edited during registration. So to quickly walk through, those of you who were in our webinar in the later half of 2024 and remember that there's been an update to the registration process, let's walk through that really quickly, and then we'll go from there and edit that registration so you can see what the edit process looks like now. So very quickly, I'm going to register some people for this event. I'm just going to register one person. When I'm signing up, I'm going to say I'm going to sign up another member. Let's just sign up Jenny Cho. Jenny Cho is attending this potluck. Jenny's going to bring a side dish. Jenny is also going to say, hey, I'm attending a potluck and I actually have a nut allergy, so we can be aware of that. And I will proceed. And that's going to be that. And we are charging $20 for this potluck just to cover, food and maybe, hosting of the, event. We're going to complete that registration and submit payment. Jenny Cho has an outstanding payment from the Halloween party, but I'm only really worried about the event registration. So I'm going to just cover this one. I'll go ahead and leave that alone. I will submit payment. I'll say she's going to receive a check. And Jenny is now registered. So I just ran through the registration process very quickly for Jenny Cho. And if we wanted to make an edit to that, so let's say Jenny Cho signed up to bring a side dish, but we actually wanted Jenny to bring an entree and we need to make a change to that. So if Jenny reaches out to us and says, hey, I signed up wrong, I want it different, an admin can come into the back end of the event by clicking on the pencil up here. And over here in the registrations button, we can go search for all of our registrants and we'll see there's Jenny Cho. And if we wanted to make a change to that registration, we would click the pencil here. After I click the pencil here, that is where the process changes. So previously, it would just take me into a completely different page that would say, what would you like to change? Instead, when I click on it, now it's going to restart the registration process. It'll start by asking, do I want to add any additional registrations to this? If I say yes, it'll allow me to add additional guests if guests are allowed for this event. If there are not guests allowed, or if I don't want to add a guest, I can say no, and then I can proceed. And from here on out, it's essentially the same process we just walked through for registration. It preloads all of the information that was entered the first time, but we can walk through registration again and just tweak things as we go. So we say, it's still Jenny registering. We'll see here's the activities that Jenny selected. You'll see it's already marked the registration. And we see the side dish here is already marked as bringing a side dish. But if I say, Jenny's not bringing a side dish, Jenny is bringing, an entree. And of course, I'm running into an issue. It's not letting me remove the side dish. Well, I'll have to ask one of our developers why it won't let me remove the side dish. But regardless, we can add other activities. We can add other items to it and proceed. We can also change the answers to questions. So we can say she doesn't have a nut allergy. She actually is vegan. And we can even alter the comments and say, you know, but we'll eat chicken. And then we can recomplete that registration. When we finish this registration, it's actually going to remove the previous registration and resubmit it as an entirely new registration. So it'll even take me to the payment page. So if there's been any change in payment, it would reflect it here. So if the changes made it cost more, then it would have me pay the difference. If the changes made it cost less, they would actually let me keep the difference as a credit. But in this case, it's the same amount. I didn't actually change anything that would alter the amount that Jenny owes, so I can just save and it zeroes out. I don't have to submit any payment. It'll just eat up the payment that I used before. So it generates a credit and then it just immediately wipes out that credit. If I wanted to alter another registration and do something like adding or removing guests, I can come in here and say, I want to change Martin Smith. And let's say I do want to add additional registrants and I select yes. I can say I want to add two guests. And now we will see there's Martin Smith. Martin Smith already had one guest, but I'm adding two additional guests. It's going to continue through the process. You'll see my initial guest is already filled in, but my additional two guests need to have their information filled in. So I'll say this is a test person, and this is test person two. Those are the additional guests that I'm bringing. And then once again, it walks me through the options for what additional activities I might select. So I can come in here and I can say this person is bringing a side. My two new guests are going to bring beverages. And then we get access to their questions. We can say Martin actually doesn't have any limitations. Samantha doesn't have any dietary restrictions. My test people are gluten free, and one of them has a nut allergy. So it just walks me through the entire registration process. For this registration edit, I do have to submit additional payment. So previously I was only having one guest attend, so the total was $45, $20 for Martin, 25 for Samantha, but I've added two more guests, each of them being a total of $25. So you'll notice the total here is higher than the total that was expected of me previously. So if I complete the registration, it's going to let me know it's going to cancel the previous registration and immediately apply that credit to this transaction. So you'll see I have $45 of credit available from my previous registration. It has immediately applied that to this transaction. And now I owe a difference of $50 for the additional two guests. So I can go ahead and say, well, he paid by check. I got a check for $50. Or I can say pay later and let Martin go log in and submit that payment on his own. But in this case, I can come in here and say record check payment. And now I am done recording that payment. So it's a much kind of more intuitive registration edit process because it's so similar to the standard registration process as opposed to a completely different walkthrough that it used to be. Um, it also allows for some interesting things that the old process didn't allow for. In the previous process, if someone had only partially paid for their registration, maybe they paid by cash or check and they only paid for part of it and they owed the remainder. If it was in the partially paid status here, previously it was not editable at all. With the new process, if someone is marked as partially paid, you can now still edit them. So you can still go make changes to someone that's partially paid. You're no longer prevented from doing that. Additionally, the long run goal for this is to add an option for members to edit their own registration. We don't have that just yet, but this is the first step in getting there. So we needed to make sure that this process works and kind of iron out all of the functions from the admin side. And once we get that complete, then we will start working on a process to allow members to edit their own registration. Obviously, only if an admin sets up an event to allow for it. Let's see. There's a few questions about it. Someone asked, when does the registration update go into effect? Immediately. So as soon as you hit submit registration, complete registration, that's when the registration changes. So if we go back through that process really quickly, let's say for Rick this time, and we say, do we want to add any additional registrations? I'm going to say no. We're actually going to remove one registrant. So let's remove Jeffrey here. And then we'll leave everything else the same. So let's say we're taking off a registrant. As soon as I get to the final page and I click complete registration, immediately at that point, the registration is updated and applied. Until that point, the registration is still there as is. So if I back out or cancel at any time, the registration stays exactly as it was before. But as soon as I hit complete registration, then it's going to submit the changes to that registration. Also note that if you want to notify someone about it, you'll see there's a little button down here. It should automatically be checked as an admin. It'll say send confirmation email to event registrant. So that will let the person know that you've made a change to their registration. If you didn't want them to get notified, say they already know that there's a change or something like that, you could uncheck this and it won't send them an email. But as soon as I hit complete registration here, those changes are applied. And then all that's left is to, submit any payment. Note here, I removed a registrant. So it's giving me the full amount back for the previous event registration and then charging me for the new registration, which is $45. But there's a difference here. There's a $70 credit because it was previously a $70 registration. And now the credit being applied is $45. Because we already received payment, we're going to give him that payment back in the form of a credit. And if I submit the new payment, again, no additional payment is required. The total amount is zero. It's just taking it out of the credit that was applied before. If I submit that payment, it's going to leave Rick with an available, if we go look at his credits, an available, sorry, wrong button, payment history, $25 credit because we canceled the old and immediately reapplied that payment. So we received a $70 credit for the previous registration that was paid, but immediately charged $45 for the new registration, leaving us with $25 of credit that can be applied to either future events or future, payments on the website. If for some reason this was all entered in error and we need to not allow them to have the credit, we would just waive that out. So we could come in here and we could say, I want to cancel that balance and say Rick doesn't actually get that $25 back. We're going to cancel it. And that will zero out that, available balance. Let's go back to our event. So again, the registration is in the same location. It's just clicking on that pencil. We've just changed what that pencil does, what the process it walks you through. So someone asked, when will the new registration process and pencil icon appear? So this registration process should be in place now. So when you go and click on the pencil on a current event, it should now give you this registration edit process. We sent out a newsletter about it, I think 2 weeks ago. I think it was this process went live sometime last week. So the old registration edit process shouldn't be showing up anymore. It should just be this registration edit process. We have a help article available. The recording of this webinar will be available for it as well. But that is that's the new registration edit process that'll be in place. Let's see. There's a few questions I'm looking over. So when the pop up, someone asked in the chat if the pop up to uh, continue to cancel the current registration and issue a credit, does the system email about the credit? It doesn't email them about the credit. It does email them about the payment being submitted. So they'll get an email letting them know that a credit payment was applied. If you choose not to check that box that says notified, they won't get the registration confirmation. But if there is a payment associated with the event, then they will get a essentially a payment receipt email. So it's going to let them know that payment has been received. If the event registration, no, they don't. Sorry, I'm still reading the chat. No, they don't get an event cancellation email. So the system is kind of canceling and re-registering them all in one. It doesn't send that your registration has been canceled. That would alarm people. We are modifying a registration. The behind the scenes, it is quote unquote canceling their registration and re-registering them, but we don't, to the users, we don't make it look like that. Um, Someone asked, what page do we get the credit history from? That's from the person's profile. Any member can either go and click on their own member profile in the top right. You can also go through the people manager. If you're in an event registration, you can actually access someone's profile straight from the registrant page. So if I'm looking at Rick here and I wanted to get to Rick's payment history, the third icon over, this little two-person hovering over a card icon, you can see it says profile when I look at the legend here. That will just take us straight to Rick's member profile. And to access that credit history, if we look at the page, we'll see payment credit history right under the history section. That is where we can go look at all of the payments and credits that have been applied in the system. All right. Those are the two major updates: the certificate builder update and the registration edit updates. I'm going to go through and look at a few questions that we have in the chat to see what I can answer. But I do just want to say both of these edits, they're pretty significant, especially the registration edit process because it changes the way events previously worked. The certificate builder update, I know some people are saying, well, that doesn't really apply to me. That doesn't really help me out. If it's not something that your organization needs or would use, again, it doesn't affect the ability to use events at all. You can just leave it alone. But for some of our organizations, especially our professional organizations who are hosting courses and examples, they it's very useful for them to be able to immediately apply these certificates to people that they can then take that certificate and save it to their computer. They could also then print it out on a printer and have it be a physical piece of paper that they can put up on the wall or store for their records. There's a lot of things they could do with it, and it's important to a portion of our customers. I know certainly not every Club Express customer is going to be using that certificate builder, but there are definitely some who are very excited about it. And in both cases here, both the certificate builder and the event registration edit process, these are both changes that we've been working on for a long time. And they're both things that are kind of, this is our first pass at them. We want to expand on them and make them, even more functional. So as you have, ideas, as you interact with them, let us know, is there something that should be added to the registration edit process? Are there fields that need to be added like hours or credits to those certificates so that we can make them even more useful to you? There's a question: if an event is set to prevent duplicates, is it impossible for a member to add guests if they've previously registered themselves? So it kind of uh, that's kind of what we're working towards. So in the system currently, if someone registers themselves and you're preventing duplicate registrations and they want to go back and add a registrant, as it is right now, the member on their own cannot edit their own registration to add a guest. So they would either have to cancel their own registration and re-register, which is what we're working to alleviate. Or they can contact an admin and say, hey, admin, I need to, add 2 or 3 people to my registration. And the admin now has access to that registration edit process on this page, where the admin can easily come in and say, click a pencil. Yes, I want to add a guest. I'm going to add 2 people to this registration. Ultimately, this is something that we would like to make available to the membership as well. So we would add, this is kind of in the works, in the plans. We don't have it available yet, but the end goal of changing this registration edit process is to allow for a toggle somewhere in the event settings to say, do we allow members to edit their own registration? And if we toggle that to yes, then the members who register would be allowed to then click edit my registration, and they can add their own guests and submit their own payments, without an admin having to do it manually. So, it's something that will eventually be available. It's something we're working on, but for the time being, we had to make this change to the event registration process before we could start working on making it available to uh, members instead of just admins. Let's see, I'm looking through a few questions. Someone asked if you do a name change in the uh, event registration edit, if you change someone's name, will the email go? So if you were to change someone's email address in their registration, yes, it should go to the new email address. So if someone, if we're editing a registration, let's look at Rick here again. If we were to edit one of these guests and change the email address. So if it was previously, testemail@gmail.com or something like that, and we altered it to another email address and then saved that registration, it should go to the updated email address. Someone had a question, are these certificates available to coordinators with calendar access? Yes. So these certificates are available to anyone who is treated as an admin by events. And when you set someone up as an event coordinator, again, that's over here in the club coordinator section. Making someone a coordinator this way of the event module would allow them to create and edit certificates. If someone is made a coordinator of just one event, however, so if we come back to a particular event, something that you'll see covered in a lot of our kind of event overviews, like our general overviews, is the option to add event contacts. So I didn't have that turned on for this event, but if I add an event contact in the basic info panel, so there's event contacts. If I set up someone as an event contact and they're not a normal admin, and I say, I'm going to add an event contact and it's going to be Carol Brady here. Carol Brady is not an admin or a coordinator, but I can check this box right here that says admin rights. That would make Carol an admin over just this event. That would not allow Carol to create or edit certificates. I believe she could come over to the after the event section and apply a certificate to the event, but she would not have the availability to create or edit certificates like we did earlier. So she'd have the ability to apply them to the event, but just not the ability to create or modify the list of available certificates. Someone said they didn't see the option to add another member guest. So if you are doing this on your own system and you are going into the registration screen, when you are editing a registration, you're only going to see the options that are available. So we've been using this potluck event, and whenever we click on someone, we see the option to add additional registrants. That's only going to appear if the event allows for guests. If you have an event set up that either A, doesn't have guest options in the who can register section. So right now we've got this set up to allow for guests, or in our registration and fees, If we set it up to allow zero guests, so we're not allowing guests to be registered, then when you go edit in either of those scenarios, when we go edit a registration, it's going to jump right past this because we're not allowed to have guests for this event. There's no way for us to add guests. The event was created not to allow them, so it's going to jump right past this. The same is actually true for the rest of the process. If we get to the activities screen, this screen won't show up for single activity events because it doesn't have any additional activities. And then the same is true for this screen, the questions screen. So the questions screen won't show up if your event doesn't have questions. So there's all the chance in the world that you might go in to edit a registration and it'll jump straight to the option to edit that person's personal information. And then when we hit next, instead of seeing these screens, it's just going to jump straight to the summary screen because there's nothing else for us to change. So it'll only show the screens that we have availability to change for that event. Let me see if there's any other questions that I'm able to answer. Someone asked, is there an option to have an event that has optional payment? So that's not related to the certificates or the event registration edit, but I can go ahead and answer that. If you have an event that is, can you have an event that is free but asks for donations? Column A, column B, yes and no. You could create a multi-activity event like I have here, and you could create a multi-activity event and make the registration free, but then add an activity or item called donation. Now, the complication there is it doesn't let them enter, you know, I want to donate $37. They have to enter, that they are donating. Now, you could make an item donation in here and say new item, donation. And when you're setting up the registration and fees, you can say, yes, a fee will be charged, but you can allow them to purchase multiple donations. So you could say, you can buy donations in increments of $10 and you can buy up to 100 of them. So you could donate up to $1,000 that way. So however, there are ways to include optional donations as a part of an event. Someone asked if someone receives a credit, can they get a refund to their credit card? Yes. So there is a way to do that. It kind of depends on how you have your payment structure set up with ClubExpress. So if someone has a leftover credit, let's go ahead and generate that really quickly. I'm going to edit Rick one more time, and I'm going to take off one more guest, and I'm going to complete that registration. So I have edited a registration. I removed a guest. So now Rick only owes $20, but he had paid $45 total for the event. It's going to leave him with $25 credit remaining. I will submit that payment. And if we go look at Rick, in Rick's payment credit history, we see there is a $25 credit. If it is a credit card transaction, if the original payment was a credit card, then we can return it. In this case, it was a check, and there's no way for us to apply a refund to a credit card that is unrelated to the transaction. But if the initial transaction had been paid by credit card and we got a credit back on that payment, if you are using ClubExpress premium payments, what you would do is head over to your money tab in the control panel, and you would choose open credits. So there's kind of it depends on which of the two payment processing options you have with ClubExpress. And I think we have, if we don't have a webinar on it, we have one coming soon. On updated refunds. But essentially, if we wanted to refund that credit, we would come in here to open credits, and we would see Rick has an option for a $25 open credit. I don't have premium credits set up on this website, but there would be an option here for me to create a refund account, and I could add $25 to my refund account. And once that clears, I could then send that back to Rick's credit card. So it's a little bit complicated. There's a couple steps. Sometimes it takes a couple days to process, but it is possible. Again, that is contingent on you using Club Express as your payment processor in either the premium or the basic payment options, and then them having paid for it by a credit card. But this is that option for premium. If your organization is one of the clubs that is using the Club Express basic payments where you have your own Stripe dashboard, instead what you would do is you would go to dashboard.stripe.com, um, and you could issue a refund from there. So you could say, go find the payment that someone submitted and mark it as refunded. You could refund a portion of it back to their credit card. You would need to come back here and come back to the screen still and say, I'm going to waive this, refund balance. So I'm marking that I refunded that balance. If you're using the premium payment option, then you can refund it straight from Club Express. But with the basic payments, there's a couple of extra steps because you have to refund part of it through Stripe and then come back to Club Express and mark that it's been refunded. Stripe doesn't send information back to us letting us know that a part of it was refunded. So you have to kind of do it in a two-step process. I know that's not super clear. I don't have the basic option available to me at the moment to kind of show you that process, but we are planning on having a kind of like reintroduction to refunds because I know our documentation on refunds is up to date, but our video details on refunds is not fully updated. So we'll do either a webinar or a training video on our YouTube channel about that topic here soon. All right, we're close to the end of my hour, and I think I've tackled as many questions as I can easily cover in relation to these certificates and to the registration edit process. If you have other questions about the way these work, please, feel free to email our support team and let them know, hey, does this work that way? We can always get back to you, that way, but just let us know what we can do. I appreciate everyone for attending, and we'll see you in our next webinar.